What if the very thing you've been protecting yourself from, opening up to possibility, is actually the key to everything you've been seeking? Today, we're exploring willingness, the gentle courage to say yes when your past has taught you to say no. For most of my life, I operated from a place of careful protection. When you grow up with a parent whose mental illness makes the world unpredictable, you learn to approach new experiences with caution. Every invitation, every opportunity, every chance for connection gets filtered through the question, what could go wrong? This wasn't pessimism, it was survival intelligence. But somewhere along my healing journey, I realized that the same protective mechanisms that helped me navigate childhood were now keeping me from the very experiences that could heal those old wounds. The shift came not through force or dramatic revelation, but through something much quieter: willingness. Willingness isn't the same as wanting. When I first brought my camera to photograph my mother in the assisted living facility, I didn't want to document her decline. I wasn't excited about spending the hours in the sterile environment, watching someone I loved disappear into illness. But I was willing to try something different than our usual painful visits. I was willing to see what happened if I approached a relationship through the lens of creativity rather than obligation. That willingness, that tiny crack in my protective armor, changed everything. Through the camera, I discovered that we could still connect. Through her written notes, I found pieces of her soul I'd never seen. Through the process, I learned that healing doesn't require wanting the difficult drag. It only requires willingness to take the next step. Here's what I've learned about willingness. It's not about becoming vulnerable or naive. It's about becoming selectively open. It's the wisdom to recognize when your protective patterns are serving you and when they're imprisoning you. My mother's illness taught her a different kind of willingness. In her notes, I found evidence of her willingness to keep trying, even when her mind was crowded with voices. Reinvent yourself. Be whoever you want to be, she wrote. Even in her confusion, she remained willing to imagine transformation. Her willingness to express herself through those scattered notes became a bridge that finally allowed us to understand each other. She was willing to be seen in her broken state. I became willing to witness her without trying to fix anything. Willingness isn't a one-time decision. It's a daily practice of staying open to what life is offering, even when it doesn't match your preferences or expectations. For me, this looked like the following: being willing to have difficult conversations instead of maintaining false peace. Being willing to create art about painful experiences instead of keeping them private. Being willing to let people see my mother's reality instead of maintaining the family secret. Being willing to receive help instead of being endlessly self-sufficient. Being willing to trust my own perceptions instead of constantly doubting them. Each act of willingness was small, but collectively, they created a life I couldn't have imagined when I was still operating purely from protection. Here's a simple practice that helps me cultivate willingness without overwhelming my protective instincts. The 3-option choice. Each day, identify one area where you've been saying no out of habit or fear rather than genuine preference. Then give yourself 3 options. 1, stay the same. This is always a valid choice. 2, take a tiny step toward willingness, the smallest possible movement. 3, make a bigger change, only if it feels genuinely right. Some examples. You've been avoiding a difficult conversation. Stay quiet, send a text saying we should talk, or have a full conversation. You've been hesitant to share your creative work. Keep it private, show it to one trusted person, Post it publicly. You've been resistant to ask for support. Handle it alone. Mention you're struggling to someone. Directly ask for specific help. The key is removing the pressure to choose the brave option. Sometimes staying the same is the right choice, but often just knowing you have options creates space for willingness to emerge naturally. When I look at the photograph of my mother's final years, I see evidence of what willingness can create. Those images that once felt like documentation of loss now feel like proof of love. The written words that seemed like symptoms of illness now read like poetry about the human condition. None of this transformation required me to want the circumstances. It only required willingness to see what might be possible within them. My mother's words, "I'm hopeless," sits right next to another that says, "I want to be a good person and have people like me." Both were true. Willingness allowed me to hold both realities without needing to resolve the contradiction. As we complete this first section of our healing card journey, notice what you've become willing to explore that you weren't ready for when we began. The first 10 cards, our maiden phase, have been about excavating, understanding, and making peace with your past and your patterns. In our next section, cards 11 through 20, we're moving into the mother phase, the full moon energy of active growth, conscious creation, and stepping into your power. This requires a different kind of willingness, the willingness to be seen, to take up space, to influence rather than just adapt. But that willingness builds out everything we've cultivated here. You've practiced letting go, loving yourself, reflecting honestly, discovering who you are beyond survival mode, accepting your complexity, expressing your truth, and grieving what you've never received. Now you're ready to be willing to grow into what you're becoming. My mother's illness could have been just a story of loss. Instead, her willingness to keep writing, keep expressing, keep reaching for connection, even in confusion, became a legacy of resilience. Her notes became healing tools. Her vulnerability became permission for others to be honest about their own struggles. Your willingness to heal, to grow, to stay open despite disappointment creates ripples you may never see. It gives others permission to try. It breaks cycles that have persisted generations. It transforms wounds into wisdom. This week, practice the one option choice with one area where you've been automatically saying no. Notice what becomes possible when you give yourself permission to consider willingness without pressure. Share in comments one thing you're becoming willing to explore that felt impossible before starting this healing journey. As we transition from understanding our past to actively creating our future, remember, willingness is not about abandoning your wisdom or ignoring red flags. It's about staying open to the growth and connection that can only happen when your heart is receptive to possibilities. Next week, we'll summarize cards 1 through 10 and discuss our journey confronting the past. I'll explain how the maiden correlates and how the waxing moon energy relates as well. Until then, take good care.